I recently watched a video about empathy, and you would think that people who have been through what you've been through would be more sympathetic to your plight and to your situation. But in actuality, it is quite the opposite. I'll give you a really interesting example. If you have a child or a niece or a nephew who is going through like their first high school breakup, what's your reaction to it at your age versus what your reaction was to it when you were going through it or your best friend was going through it, right? You are actually much more sympathetic at the time. What you are now is very understanding, but you're not necessarily very sympathetic about it because your attitude is more like, yep, that's life, happens to everyone. You'll get through it. You'll find someone else. And they're, totally devastated, right? No, she's the one. There's never going to be another guy like him or whatever. And then you're just like, relax. You know what I mean? Drama queen, right? So that's exactly the issue here, right? So as I do this channel, I come from a place, as I introduce myself week in and week out, that my name is Mason T and I am an importer and a product developer. So where I'm at as far as the e-commerce space is at, the upper end of the complexity when it comes to doing e-commerce. And what reselling is at its beginning. So that's why when I do this channel, it seems as if like, I come off in a certain way that I think a lot of people misunderstand me. Okay. The only way that I could present it is from kind of like a tough love kind of angle, right? Because I see what's happening to you guys for what it is, whether you are defensive about it or still in denial or whatever. Okay. Because what we're going to talk about today is that whether you are a reseller or you want to try reselling, or you are currently a reseller right now, this is going to be a very tough pill to swallow, right? So I'm just going to come out and say it right now. The whole eBay reseller community, okay, although it initially comes from a place of good intentions, right? And a lot of stuff comes from good intentions, and that's why it pushes as hard as it does. But ultimately, it is a bucket of crabs, all right? If you want to grow, if you want to evolve, and you are part of this reseller community, they're going to try to pull you back down, okay? Because all of their messaging says exactly that. If you are a reseller, just watch other resellers, just watch other people do what you do and whatever. But the issue is this: reselling in itself is very simplistic, and it's just the entry level to what e-commerce is. It's the first rung of the ladder. And you're not supposed to stay there. You're not supposed to be in the sandbox forever. You're not supposed to play the tutorial of a video game forever. Because eventually, I think deep down inside, we all know that it is far better to deal with a replenishable product than it is to have a one-off item, right? So to deal with multiple one-off items, it's manageable in the beginning, but eventually you get into a hard ceiling. And when you hit that hard ceiling, what happens? That's where the feeling of burnout starts to creep in. Even to the point where, you got YouTubers who have the name burnout in their name, right? Mel is called Back to Burnout. I'm sorry, Back from Burnout for a reason. Even though she does some tutorials about like eBay and selling books and stuff, half of her content is constantly talking about the grind and the burnout and dealing with it. And most of her only suggestion and her only solution is to try to find her happy place so that she can continue doing what she's doing and try to be emotionally more okay with it. But that's not a real plan forward, right? And at the same time, she's also trying different things. So the thing is this: we have to first recognize the business model for what it is, right? Which is reselling is barely even a business model. That's why people call it a grind. That's why it's called a hustle. A hustle is not a business. A hustle is a hustle, right? So how does it become a business? Well, a business has to have some kind of equity. It has to have, anything like intellectual property. It has to be some kind of value that you built over time, so that if somebody was to take over your business, whether they were to buy your business or you were to hand it over to them, there would be something of value there. Okay. So, what I mean by that is like this: if you were to sell off your reselling business today, what is it worth? What is your account worth that somebody else couldn't have just started their own account? As far as the listing that you have of a lot of one-off items, when you sell that listing is gone with it. So you don't have high-ranking listings or anything that you've built up over time. What do you have built up over time? Your product knowledge, right? And this is why a lot of resellers are very arrogant when they push back against me and they say, well, you don't understand, I sell collectibles, I do antiques, I do like, you know what I mean? But every single thing that they're saying, that they're listing, is not business wisdom, it's just product knowledge. So who do you really want to have a lot of product knowledge in your company? The employee has a lot of product knowledge, right? The boss has to have a lot of business wisdom, right? How to structure the business, how to add the systems and stuff, okay? Oftentimes, you'll have your thought leaders and your gurus in the eBay reseller community specifically talk about having systems in your business. But they ignore the most important system, the main system, which is the system of automation. Instead of telling you guys to go out and source a whole bunch of items, bring it back, and then make individual listings to sell all of them once, what you should be doing is trying to source a bulk amount of items. So it's one item in bulk so that you make one listing and then you can sell it many times over. Just saying this part out loud, you could already tell that the workload is night and day. But the thing is that I recognize that what I said is easier said than done. Everybody's going to say, yeah, but the thing is that you need initial capital to invest in a product. You have to do the research ahead of time to make sure that you could select a good product. How do you even do the research part? How do you find somebody to help you develop your product? All that stuff. But that doesn't take away the fact that that is still the goal at the end of the day. And what the eBay reseller community does is they try to tell you to stop thinking about that goal. Forget about that goal, you know? Just stay as a reseller. And that's what a lot of the business platitudes, a lot of the motivational fluff type of videos out there work towards. And what that's doing is that it is crabs in a bucket. It keeps you in that level 1 bucket. Because ultimately, if you understand mindset, mindset changes your worldview. Why are you able to do something and somebody else is not able to do it? Why are they able to do something and you're not able to do it? It's because of our beliefs. I believe that this is how it works. And that's why I have the energy to get up and keep doing it this way every single day. I'm going to give you a quote, okay, which is from Henry Ford. And he says, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So what does that mean? It means that if you tell yourself that, no, this can't be done, then don't worry about it. It won't be done. If you believe that it can be done, then you have a fighting chance of making it happen. So if you want that replenishable item one day, okay, all you have to do is want it, and then we will work towards it, because that's what I do on this channel. I'll teach you guys the whole framework of how to do the research, how to do the innovation, how to contact the sourcing agent, get your stuff made, and how to do risk mitigation. You remember that lady that had the Amazon item that she did the stroller bags? She was super mad at her mentors, right? She paid something like $10,000 and they taught her how to do Amazon. Ultimately, they did teach her how to do Amazon because she did sell $10,000 worth of goods within the first 90 days. So they absolutely taught her how to do Amazon. But what she was super upset about is that she received so many returns that it tanked her business. And then she comes back and she says, well, there wasn't a module in the program that taught me how to deal with the returns and stuff. But this isn't the right approach for business at all. This is the wrong approach as a student. And I can't speak much for the mentor because we only heard her side of the story. But what was supposed to happen is that you need both proof of concept as well as proof of value. And what that means is that proof of concept is when you're able to come up with an idea. But more than just an idea, can you produce this item? Do you have somebody? Do you have a factory that you're working with? And can you even sell this item? Does anybody actually even want it? Proof of value is, do you sell enough of this item to warrant reordering it so that it becomes a lucrative business so that we could keep doing this? So initially, her stroller bag, she does have proof of concept. She has the concept of the stroller bag. She had it produced in China. She got it over here and she did start to sell those. But then what happened is that the proof of value is where a whole bunch of people started returning her stuff because maybe there was a deal breaker somewhere, something is faulty with the item, whatever the case is, a lot of people returned it. Enough people returned it to the point where it's really, really difficult to chalk it up to just trolling, because there's no way that there was a coordinated attack of hundreds of people returning your item. Even if people are abusing the whole, Amazon seller return system, right? If everybody did that at the numbers that she's saying, then there's a lot of sellers that would have tanked already. And so that doesn't really make any sense. How do you account for all of the other sellers that are thriving just fine on Amazon, right? So what was supposed to happen is that you're supposed to do some risk mitigation here. You were supposed to start off with a minimum order quantity and then try to sell it on multi different platforms such as eBay, Etsy, Walmart, wherever applicable, and then see what happens first before you commit to a 10,000 piece order and then just dump it all into Amazon FBA and then have everything sent back to you. You see what I'm saying? So with that said, today I want to cover 6 platitudes that you often hear in all sorts of, eBay reseller videos, whether it's like a motivational fluff video or it's some kind of tutorial video, but you hear it everywhere you go. So this is going to be a critique video where I'm specifically not going to call out any names, but if you know who I'm talking about, then if you know, and you could go ahead and leave that in the comments below. Okay. So number one, number one is actually going to be the most egregious one I have ever heard. Okay. Which is, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. This is a quote by Mark Twain. And what he says, I actually agree with on paper. That would be very nice, right? If you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. But this is Mark Twain talking about his love of being an author. And of course, he sold a lot of books, right? Everybody knows, like, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. So the thing about that is, he gets to do what he loves, and he sold a lot of books and he made a lot of money. And that's great. So, who wouldn't love to be in his position? However, when you are talking specifically about eBay reselling, we are dealing with a very inefficient way of doing business. Because when you think about getting a whole bunch of things in order to sell, and you have to make an individual listing for all of it, and for every single individual listing that you made, you only get to sell it once because you only have one-off items. This is like clearing the dinner table one dish at a time. That's a lot of work for a small amount of output, for a small amount of payoff. So telling yourself, well, I love what I'm doing, that doesn't change anything. That doesn't improve your situation. All it does is make it a little bit emotionally more bearable. So what is the issue here? The issue is that they don't want you researching and looking into better ways of doing business. Just stay as a reseller. So what is the agenda behind this? I'll tell you, all 6 of the platitudes, ultimately, at the end of the day, is just to lock you in as a reseller forever. Why? Because they haven't done more business. So they can't teach you more things. They can't teach you how to become a white labeler or a private labeler. They can't teach you how to develop your own products. They only know how to make reseller videos. And if you start looking into evolving and becoming more than a reseller, you're not going to watch their videos anymore. And you're certainly not going to join their support groups, right? Where like you pay monthlies and stuff like that. But anyways, let's move on to the second one. Okay. The second one, this one's a funny one, which is good money is not easy and easy money is not good. Okay. See, here's the thing about all of these platitudes. Okay. I wholeheartedly agree with every single one of them, actually, on paper. But once you apply it to what's happening here in the reseller conversation on YouTube, okay, that's not the agenda. That's not the reason why they're saying what they're saying. Okay. Because when you talk about, good money is not easy and easy money is not good, you're supposed to be talking about like illegal activity, right? So easy money is no good. Or you're selling drugs or you're a hitman or some, I don't know, something bad, right? That money is no good because that could get you in a lot of trouble. And an honest day's work is very difficult to do. So what happens when we apply it to what reselling is, they want you to believe that, yeah, reselling in its difficulty is an honest day's work and it's very difficult and et cetera, right? This gets your head in the sand instead of, having a clear vision of what is happening, which is the idea of what reselling is very inefficient. So when they tell you, yeah, but see, the issue is that good money is not easy. So you're supposed to now embrace the difficulty and the inefficiency of what the business is, rather than to go ahead and research what better disciplines, better structures, how to evolve the business so that there would be less touch points within the system. For example, once you start having a replenishable item, you just make the listing once and then you revise it periodically. You never take more photos than necessary. You're not taking photos of every single item that you bring in, where you're hyper niching sideways every single day, which is crazy work, right? Also, whenever you're developing an item, you spend a lot of time developing an item. You don't just use like some STR method and some BOLO method and then call it a day and then say that's research. That's not enough research at all. Have you researched exactly what all your competitors are? Have you researched what the pain points are? Are you also able to have exclusivity over your item so that you're not sharing the market with other people? Do you also have full creative control over your item so that you could adjust it accordingly of all the pain points that you're reading from customer reviews, so that when you release a version 1.2 or a version 2 or a version 3, it's so much better than the one before, so that now you start to dominate the market? You can't do that as just a reseller. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying in the beginning. The discipline of what reselling is, the whole hustle of what reselling is too simplistic for you to have enough options in order to get fancy with it, so that you could start removing yourself from the equation more while still maintaining a lot of the sales. So when you think of the second part, which is to say the easy money's no good, they train people to believe that, like, okay, so what I'm saying with how to build proper systems so that, it's smoother sailing, this is a get rich quick scheme. Don't listen to this guy. He's trying to fool you into something, et cetera, while at the same time they get you to join their classes. You know what I mean? It's like the whole thing is very rich. So the whole, good money's no easy, easy money is no good. It locks you in as a reseller mentality, and it tells you to not compare it to the outside world. So the next one is actually another one that locks you in, right? Which is the idea that I see a lot of people say this a lot. So number 3 is, there's no right way to do business. Okay, this is very interesting. So this one really needs a lot of self-reflection and debate when you think about the right way to do business and the wrong way to do business, and there's no right or wrong way to do business, et cetera, right? Okay. See, the thing is that if somebody is dealing in, I don't know, clothing and jewelry, and somebody like me, I sell automotive items, right? Would you say there's no right way or wrong way to do business because I could also do jewelry and they could also do automotive? Yeah, kinda. But then again, if you made me do a different category, I might not have the same passion and interest as I do in the automotive sector, right? And vice versa for the other person. So in a way, we're kind of stuck doing the things that we have to be doing, right? So when you say right and wrong, yeah, there's still kind of a right and wrong. You still are locked into a certain, confines, right? There's still a staple there. So what I mean by this is, when you think about the freedoms of what doing reselling is, okay, there's a lot of chaos through this kind of freedom. Why? Because I'll give you a great example. Is there any guru or any educator on YouTube that's doing reselling or whatever that specifically tells you how long are you supposed to hold on to an item before you declare that item dead inventory, that you're just not going to be able to sell it? And then on top of this is that if you do have dead inventory, specifically, what is the exit strategy? Who's talking about the exit strategy? If anything, every single time I hear anything even close to an exit strategy, it is either between lowering the price or discarding or donating the item. And when you discard or donate the item that you paid money in order to source to begin with, now we're just losing money. So this is what your mentors and thought leaders are doing, that they're teaching you how to lose money, all because they blame it back on you, that like, well, it's because of you sourced the bad item, so this is what you get. That's only is because they told you to just jump in and start without doing the proper research. And even when it comes to the research, you're just doing like the STR method. The STR method is a snapshot of the past. That's exactly what it is, because it is the collective sales of what people sold 90 days ago, 30 days ago, like whatever your settings are. So how does this help you predict trends? How does this help you spot gaps? How does this position you in a good place to do an item before other people are doing it so that you could have good margins? It doesn't. It doesn't do any of those things. It just tells you to do like a follow the leader thing. And the biggest problem with the whole STR system is that it is a passive way of doing things as opposed to being a proactive way of trying to predict the marketplace. So many times, what if you end up at the tail, at the end of a trend? Then you're probably going to get stuck with that item. So, when it comes to a lot of the systems, a lot of the strategies that they're talking about when you're doing reselling, again, it's because it's very simplistic and therefore it's very limited on the things that you can do versus what a traditional business is. Again, everybody has to start somewhere. So I'm not against reselling, and I think it's a great way to learn the ropes, to get some practice in. But pretty much anybody who has done reselling for anywhere between like 6 months to a year, you could be well on your way to pivoting and evolving and doing something better. So the next one I want to talk about is, you're going to love this. Number 4 is the comparison is the thief of joy. Okay. I'm sure you guys have heard this one many times. Comparison is the thief of joy. Even on Joe Rogan's show, he has talked about comparison being the thief of joy. But the thing about when we talk about business, right, is that I really like to use precise language when we're talking about business, because it's very important that we do so. So when you think about precise language, it's not so much that comparison is the thief of joy, but rather envy is the thief of joy. Comparison is just comparison. Comparison, to say comparison is the thief of joy, is kind of like a blanket statement that doesn't always hold true. Because what is shopping? Shopping is comparing, isn't it? Like, I'm going to compare this price to that price between comparable items, right? I'm going to compare this feature to that feature, this color to that color. I'm going to compare. And when we compare, what are we trying to do? We're trying to make educated decisions. So when the guru, when the thought leader, when your YouTuber tells you comparison is the thief of joy, so don't compare. Yeah, they put it in a framework so that it's like, look, you're going to compare yourself to other sellers, and then maybe they're making more money than you, and then you're going to feel bad. So look, don't compare. Yeah, okay. But there could also be a comparison where you realize that, like, you know what I'm doing is very inefficient. So when I talk to other people, they're telling me, yeah, I also feel the burnout is very inefficient. I'm starting to feel the physical ceiling cap as well. And then you start to confirm it with other people and other people and other people. And then you get together and you're like, hey, what are we going to do about this? Maybe we should go over to Peg's channel and then learn how to private label and develop our own items so that we can start breaking the ceiling, right? And they don't want you to do that. And that's what's so hysterical about it. So comparison is the thief of joy. You're going to suck out all the joy in your life if you just start comparing stuff. But if you don't start comparing stuff, how do you judge things to make good judgment calls? How do you compare things so that, like, you have meaningful data so that you could make good business decisions, because ultimately that's what life is all about, making good decisions. A succession of good decisions is going to land you in a good place, and a succession of bad decisions is going to land you in a bad place. It's always been that way, right? So comparison is the thief of joy. Kind of a blanket statement that doesn't always hold true. It's more like envy is the thief of joy. So it's only when the comparison leads you down a road of jealousy and envy that it's going to leave you in a funk. It's going to put you in a bad place. But if you're comparing for the sake of meaningful data so that you could make good judgments in your business, then absolutely you should be comparing all the time. You got to be, assessing the data back and forth and comparing yourself to other resellers. You're just trying to see if you are experiencing the same frustration as somebody else. And when they can corroborate your story and concur with exactly what you're going through, you're not crazy. It's not just you. Something's up over here. It's because they keep on trying to romanticize and sensationalize what reselling is. Don't worry about those other levels. There is no second floor. There is no third floor. There's no right way of doing business. Reselling is fine. And that's why you're stuck in this cycle. Again, the reseller community, it starts off in a good place, and anybody who wants to get into reselling, they're more than happy to help you out, and you will learn stuff from them. This is all absolutely true. But when it is time for you to grow, when it's time for you to evolve, they don't let that happen. And that is what I'm trying to point out in pretty much all the videos in my channel, okay? So, guys, again, I come from a position of tough love, all right? And I know I come off as like, maybe not as humble, not as sympathetic or whatever. It's because I've done the upper stuff and I can't wait to teach it to you guys. But you have to be able to swallow this pill and understand, right, that what's happening right now is that you are kept in the dark about something because they want to retain you as a viewer. So, number 5, okay? Oh, I covered this one before. Love this one. It is, we make our money when we buy. Absolutely true, okay? But the problem is that when we reapply this thing over to what reselling is, there's a lot of context missing, and there's a lot of caveats that need to be added to this. Because when you are an eBay reseller, you are a passive seller, okay? This isn't passive income, this is passive selling. It's two different things. There's a lot of stuff to explain here. So when you list an item, you put it there, especially as a one-off seller, you put it there, and it doesn't have any conversion or sales history because it's a one-off item, right? So now it's pretty much starting from zero, and as many eyeballs as you get, finally a customer is going to come by and pick it up. This is passively waiting for a sale. When we make our money when we buy, it's basically saying the idea that if we buy our stuff for very low, then we're going to have more margins. And that way we make our money basically like when I bought the item. So that when I sold the item, I basically made my money when I bought. Not quite. It's supposed to be I make my money when I buy because that is the last act that is required in order to complete the transaction. That's how it's actually supposed to work. The first rule of business, always remember this, always keep this very close to your heart, okay, is to identify the customer, find the customer. These two things, okay? So when you are new to the industry, it's very important that you identify the customer, and then you have to find the customer, right? Because ultimately, long story short, you're not going to sell a lot of cologne to the women, and you're not going to sell a lot of perfume to the men. So we need to identify our demographic. I did a video once where it was about Chomps, right? And Chomps was kind of like this healthy version of Slim Jims, that it had low sugar, it was high in protein, it's good beef, you know what I mean? And what they did is that they marketed it to the keto and paleo community immediately. Why? Because they're always looking for good beef. They want low sugar. They want to eat a lot of protein and stuff because they're keto paleo. Exactly. So ultimately, you'll notice that no matter what kind of tricks to mark up to mark down, sales pitches, right? Sweet talking and stuff like that, it's not going to compare to selling the right product to the right audience. So finding your audience is crucial, right? Because if you find the right audience, you're going to sell your item very easily because that's exactly what they're looking for. Okay. So with that said, right, when we come back to saying things like we make our money when we buy and combining the first rule of that, you have to find your buyer first. I'll give you three excellent examples. Okay. The first example would be my Target Walmart example. All right. Which is I have a pre existing commitment with a vendor, right? So let's say I talk to either Target or Walmart and then I get a purchase order for them for 10,000 pieces. I could take this purchase order over to the bank and then they will what? They will approve my loan. And I'll say, hey, can I get a loan for X amount of money? I have this purchase order. And because of Target's reputation, right, I'm going to get approved for the loan. I take that money and then I go talk to the manufacturer and try to negotiate a better price for 10,000 units. And of course, they're going to lower the price because I'm buying 10,000 units. So what happened here? I made my money when I bought because all I have to do now is fulfill the order. And how do I fulfill the order? I need to go buy the product because I've already negotiated the order before that. We have a pre-existing agreement. I made my money when I buy. I'll give you scenario number two. Scenario number two is exactly what we talked about as far as proof of concept to proof of value, right? Which is basically the idea that once I have my item and then I sell some in the beginning to test the market, to see what the market response is. And you know what? It's pretty good. It's moving anywhere between 7 to 10 a day. I'm going to do this for the next 3 weeks to try to get a good solid number. And I average out to 8 units every single day. So I have proof of value at 8 units every single day. So 8 units times 30 days is about 240. So I'm going to need at least around 250 just to be safe every single month. Now, if I have to calculate the lead time of production as well as delivery, let me get a good 90-day supply. So at 250 pieces, I need a good 750 pieces at least to be safe with the factory. So when I contact the factory and I tell them, hey, I know I started off with 50 pieces from you guys, 150 pieces from you guys, but I need to increase my order to 750 pieces. They give me a discount on that. I already know I have demand waiting for me, so I made my money when I buy. The third example would be like a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, right? Where you basically have, again, pre-orders. So you have pre-existing commitment, not from one big buyer like Target or Walmart, but from a whole bunch of people who followed your Indiegogo or Kickstarter campaign. So that after you sold the item to them, now all we have to do is fulfill the order. Ultimately, at the end of the day, right, what is the idea? The idea is that it is far harder to sell something than it is to buy something. If you had to go buy something, buying is very simple because anybody will take your money. But if you had to sell something, which is, I'm trying to get somebody to open their wallet to me, people are very frugal. People are very careful. You better give me a very good reason. You better offer some real value. And then I'll think about your asking price. This is very different, right? So when you say I made my money when I buy, it has to be the final easy part to fulfill the order, not buying stuff and then putting it on eBay and still waiting for the sale. You haven't made any money yet, especially for those of you who ended up with a lot of items that actually didn't move after 90 days, after 6 months, after 2 years. Where's the money? Okay, so number 5, okay? No, that was number 5. We're finally on to the last one. The last one is doubling a penny for 30 days, okay? Essentially, if you ever seen this thought experiment, is that if you take a penny and then you doubled it in 30 days, you would end up with a little over 5 million, okay? Right. Honestly, there has never been a better example of something that is supposed to work on paper, theoretically, that absolutely does not work in practice, in real life at all, okay? And if you would use this as a way to explain anything other than a compounding effect, but if you try to use it as a real world example, immediately it tells me you haven't done much business and you don't know anything. You really don't know what you're talking about. So the more you get into it, the more you expose, you don't really know what you're talking about. Okay. And I'll prove it to you right now. So when you think about reselling, there's pretty much two paths to go. You could either scale by volume or you could scale by value. Okay. So let's say we do the knee jerk reaction of what most people are doing right now, which is scaling by volume. If you were to go out and get one pair of shoes, then you would sell that item and then try to double your money so that you could get two pairs of shoes, and then double your money so you could get four pairs of shoes, right? So basically, it's going to be the computer RAM numbers, right? So 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 512, 1024, 2048, right? So it keeps going on and on from there. But the thing is this, if I did one today and then two tomorrow, doable. Four tomorrow, the day after, it's doable, right? 8 and then 16. Now at 32, can you source and list and sell 32? Let's say you can. 64? Okay, let's say you can. 128. Like, I'm just going to keep going with this because we have to go all the way to 5 million. So let's be realistic. It's not going to happen. At some point, you're going to hit your physical ceiling. So let's be more realistic. Okay, let's say somebody's physical cap is at 25. So this is what's going to happen. Okay, you're going to try to follow this kind of idea, this kind of thought concept, right? This kind of mindset. Yeah, I'm going to try reselling. I'm going to double my money. So today I bought one pair, and then tomorrow I sold that. I'm going to wait until I sell that thing so that I could do two, right? I'm going to wait until I sell that, and then I'm just going to keep going from there. So it's going to become what? 2, 4, 8, 16, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25. It doesn't double after that. You hit the ceiling afterwards. Now let's factor in your real world overhead. What is your living expenses? Do you have external storage? Do you have a warehouse, et cetera, et cetera? You have bills to pay. You have mouths to feed. So what happens now? Every single time you flip an item, are you even flipping it so that afterwards your net profit is $1 on the dollar? That's also another question, right? What if you're only making 50 cents on the dollar? Then you're compounding on top of it. It's not even about doubling. You're only getting like a quarter. You're only getting a half, like after taxes, after expenses, after your own personal expenses. So there's a lot of real world things that once it's factored into it, it doesn't actually work in practice. Okay, because there are real world constraints. There are real world because see, when you think about the law of conservation, right, where they say like I think it's like energy or matter like cannot be created nor destroyed or whatever. Okay, so essentially there's only three things in life, right? There's goods, services, and money, and these three things can be transmuted kind of like alchemy, right? So basically in the beginning when you're young and then you go say work for McDonald's or you're a stock boy or whatever, you don't have goods, you don't have money. All you have is services. You trade your services for money. And therefore with the money, you could go buy goods with it, right? So now that we're dealing in tangible goods online, I am selling goods in order to get money, right? And I have to put my services into my business, which is all the research and dealing with sourcing agents and importing stuff and whatever, in order to acquire those goods so that I could trade those goods for money. And then once I have the money, I could go buy more goods with it, etc. So it's always goods, services, money constantly, right? Now, when you factor in time and energy on top of this in your services portion, right? The whole logic of, doubling a penny starts to fall apart. The only thing that it teaches is the idea of compounding effort. But the thing is that this example is very rich when it comes to talking about reselling, because reselling, your efforts, they don't compound the same way as they do in a traditional business. In a traditional business, you are laying out a foundation. Okay, so what's happening? Let's say we have a regular day job. Okay. And we also want to start pivoting over to a little bit of white labeling, a little bit of private labeling, something like that. So every day we do our day job. And then with whatever free time that I have left, I'm going to do a little bit of research. And as I do more and more research of who the competitors are, what the marketplace is like, what YouTubers are saying about this product, like what reviewers are saying, what a lot of product reviews are saying, as well as I try to dive, what the mechanics and the fundamentals of this item is. So I start to read books on the category, the product, the niche that I'm trying to learn about, so that I have all the perspectives and all the knowledges from every single angle when I want to try to tackle this particular item, right? So I spend my time developing myself on this first. Then I start to be able to see where the gaps of opportunity is. And then I'm going to start innovating in that direction so that I could produce an item that provides value the way that people want it. And when you do that, people are willing to trade you a premium for this and pay you for this. Okay. On top of this, I'm also going to do some research of which sourcing agents I can work with, which factories are good, what the material, what the construction is. And then I also want to do some research as to different price quotes so that I get a good deal on this item, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all the preliminary work that you're putting into every single day as we're still doing the day job before we finally get our first batch, and then we put it on eBay and then we start to try it, right? Alternatively, if you are currently a reseller, then I would advise you that as a reseller, what you do is that whatever you're reselling right now, right, whatever number that you're doing, like let's say you're capping at like 35, like sourcing 35, listing 35, like every single day, you have to still try to find the time in order to plan and pivot eventually over to, having your own exclusive item some way, somehow. It doesn't necessarily have to be a private label item. You don't necessarily have to import the item. You could produce the item from home yourself. I've showed videos in the past of people who make slime from home. They make baked goods from home. They do woodworking. They do 3D printing, like all that stuff. But you have to go find the time to learn those things, right? To produce an item, to see what the pain points of what people are looking for so that you could start planning for this direction. And then once you do that and you have a successful item, it becomes smooth sailing from there. See, these are the things that they don't want me to talk about, and they don't want you to listen to it either. So when we come back to talking about doubling a penny for 30 days, the other way is to scale by value, right? But however, the problem is this: if you had to scale stuff by value, then the ticket of the item needs to increase. But more oftentimes than not, when the ticket of the value of the item starts to increase, what happens? The level of product knowledge also needs to increase on top of that. So I'll give you that perfect example that they use all the time, right? Like you could go out and sell a yacht for like $100,000, right? Isn't that what they tell you? And or you could go out and get everyday items, and then I could do like 100,000 items at $1, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll probably get there first. Yeah, that's probably true because you have no business background and you have no business selling yachts, right? You have to work yourself up to that point. So when you think of what the next ticket item from everyday goods are, so everyday goods would be like, I don't know, anything between like a pair of shoes to a jacket to a shower curtain, things that you don't really need too much product knowledge of. You could sell those things first. But then once you're talking about anything like a high-end pair of sneakers, like what do you know about high-end sneakers? When you're talking about handbags and stuff, what do you know about like, vintage ladies handbags or whatever? And then you move over to, let's say, watches, right? It could be anything between like a Grand Seiko to an Omega to a Rolex or whatever. What do you know about watches? You're going to have to start elevating your knowledge with every level that you go up. And that, again, becomes very difficult until you can finally become a yacht salesman. Ultimately, are there yacht salesmen that are out there in existence? Yes, absolutely. Otherwise, when you think about how celebrities purchase yachts, who are they purchasing it from if there are no yacht salesmen? But you're not a yacht salesman yet, unless you want to be. That is the difference. So when we're talking about flipping things at value, right, there is real world constraints that we have to overcome. When you think about flipping things at volume, there are, again, real world restraints that we have to overcome. So essentially, how do I do things at volume? It's very simple, okay? I'll tell you the answer right now. It's eventually to become an Amazon FBA seller. If you want to be a one-man army and then overcome the volume constraints, then you just go to Amazon FBA. That's it. You have to lay down the foundation by properly researching and developing your item. And then you have to test it in the marketplace so that you have proof of value first. Exactly what I said first. We find our buyer. That way, once we scale forward, then we make our money when we buy. Now I have the demand and the item is starting to move. As it gains more and more popularity, what do? We leverage Amazon FBA because Amazon already has the people, the facility and the structure to do all that packing all the time. So by the time, if you have an item that's moving 10,000 units every single month, 20,000 units every single month because it's gone viral, you have the ability to do this through Amazon FBA. They'll handle the customer service, the shipping, the inventory, like all that stuff for you. All you have to do is handle, the money, as well as, reordering and making sure that you are properly stocked. So at the end, there is a way to overcome like these real world constraints, but it needs time for you to build up to do that. And not in the narrative and the way that these gurus are pushing it off to you, okay? So again, I wanna be very clear. I'm not against reselling. It's an excellent way to start, to practice, to understand things. But ultimately, I think we all know deep down inside that developing a replenishable item, you're gonna have a better life doing that than to constantly be doing the one-off items, right? But the question is, why are they not nudging you in this direction? Because ultimately that should be the goal, as opposed to intentionally trying to keep your head in the sand and say, no, don't worry about that. Just resell. Reselling is fine. We're resellers and we're all in this together. What are you talking about? You have your own bills. You have your own mouths to feed. You have your own family to take care of, right? Anyways, guys, that is the video. If you enjoyed that, please give it a big like. And if you learned something, please consider subscribing. As always, I'll see you guys in the next. Take care.